Hello everyone, and welcome to Zara's Story Block. I'm Zara Ariana, and today I'm going to be reading for you A Mammoth Mistake, written by Judy Waite, illustrated by Sarah Wibronton. It all began when Dad saw the adjustment in the paper. Children's authoricals dig. Places still available work with a highly qualified archaeologist. You could discover the treasures of the ancient world. Call Professor Novan at 119256. After all, you'll never know. This all looks good, Rachel, Dad said. Dad. It'll give you something to do over the holidays. What's wrong with watching television? What's wrong with watching television? I asked. Dad frowned. You need to be out in the fresh air, he said. But I don't like arky wasting things. They are boring, I said. You like that museum I took you last summer? Dad said. It didn't answer. The truth was, I had not liked the museum. The only good thing had been the gift shop. I bought Monty there. Monty was a little carved woolly mammoth made about 14,000 years ago. Well, he wasn't really that old. He was just a copy of a tool that ancient people used. The real one was in the museum inside a glass case. I kept Monty in his plastic display box. I gave Dad a take pity on me. Look, it didn't work. At 10 o'clock next morning, I was at the archaeological dig. I took Monty with me. Right from the start, I didn't get along with the Professor Norman. He had bought this site a climbing old house with a huge overground garden. Because it was a great archaeological interest, it's surprising how much we can learn from these things. Even like ancient rubbish. Professor Norman told us as soon as we arrived. So here's Professor Norman, and here's Rachel. She looks very small from everyone. All of the other children looked very interested. Wouldn't mind at all being up to their elbows in enchanted rubbish. But I couldn't help it. My thoughts just sort of jumped out of my mouth. Yuck, I said. You won't get me around that. Professor Woman glared at me after that. He began to pick on me. He gave me the dirtiest and most boringest job to do. By lunchtime, I was really fed up. I sat on my own, munching my sandwiches. The only company I had was Monty. I'd bought him so I could ask Professor Norman questions about him. Except after that, Professor Norman had been so horrible I didn't feel like asking him anything. I took Monty out of his display box. The label on the box said that was an old tool. That was a tool the ancient people used for hunting. Perhaps they could hunt for some ancient treasure for me now. Time to get back to work, Professor Norman said. Professor Norman, get the wheelbarrow. I've got piles of mud to move. No? I began, but Professor Norman glared at me again. I changed my mind and quickly slipped Monty in my pocket. Then I went to get the wheelbarrow. That's when the real trouble began. I found some sort of ornament, shouted one of the children. He was holding something small and muddy. I knew right away what that was. Monty had fallen out of my pocket into the mud. Still, it shouldn't have been a problem. Professor Norman would know that Monty was only a copy. I walked forward, about to ask him back. Stand back! Stand back! Growled Professor Norman. This could be the find of the century. Professor Norman lifted Monty with a pair of tweezers. He carried Monty on the table that was set up for his finds. At the side of the garden, he stared at Monty through a magnifying glass. I was feeling sick. Any minute now, Professor Norman would realize he had been tricked, and he would come roaring back. But that didn't happen. Professor Norman hurried over with his mobile phone in his hand. I've called the television news, he said, and they'll be here soon. I tried to tell him then. I really did. Professor Norman, hurry up and get back to work, Professor Norman said to me. This is my big chance. I want to look like a busy site where everyone is happy, but I just... At that moment, a man and woman appeared. The man was carrying a TV camera. At that moment, a man and a woman appeared. That man was carrying a TV camera. Professor Norman rumbled his hands together. "Welcome," he said. "I'm sure your viewers will want to know about the story." I couldn't stand any longer apart from anything else. I wanted Monty back. "Actually," I said loudly, "he's mine." Professor Norman looked at me if he wished I were about 14,000 years away. The TV people smiled kindly, but they kept on setting up the camera. "I can prove it." I showed them the plastic box and pointed to the label. "Wesley Hill Museum, copy of an ancient hunting tool carved from the reindeer author." The TV people suddenly seemed very interested. "So, Professor Norman, didn't you know it was fake?" asked the TV woman. Professor Norman stared, backing away towards the house. Of course I did. It was just a joke," he said, but his face was bright red. He definitely wasn't laughing. "But you told us when you called that you'd find an ancient tool," said the cameraman. Professor Norman began to mutter and mumble. "Anyone can make a mistake, can't they?" The TV people didn't look pleased. They'd been dragged all this way from just for Monty. Professor Norman looked even unpleased. I want my mammoth back," I said. Professor Norman glared at me. He threw Monty on the ground. Then I ran up the garden in the house. And I put an end to our day. The TV people were still there. When I left. I guess they wanted to talk to Professor Norman again. It wouldn't be the kind of news story he'd wanted. Dad said that perhaps we would have more fun watching TV after all. Oh, the funny thing was, I didn't want to. Instead, I went to the warm summer evening with Monty and a wheelbarrow and began digging. After all, you'll never know. Okay, ready? So the summary of this book is that Professor Norman thought that Rachel's toy was a real ancient tool from many years ago, but when the TV man and woman came, they realized that it was just a copy of a carved tool. So that Rachel bought from the gift shop but accidentally dropped in the mud. So the moral of this story is that if you want to share your excitement with others, you have to make sure if you're doing the right thing or not. So thank you for listening to the story that I just read for you, And also, if you want to see more of my videos, like and subscribe to Zara's Storybook. I hope so, and I'll see you in the next story that I'm gonna read for you. Bye!